Kim Jong-un's disaster. North Korea is going through a historic embarrassment in Ukraine. There's a secret that world governments tried to hide for months, but it leaked through satellite images, intelligence reports, and frozen bodies on European battlefields. A secret that forced one of the world's most closed-off regimes to break its 70-year silence. While you watch this video, young soldiers who grew up totally cut off from the outside world are dying by the thousands in a land they never imagined stepping foot on. We're not talking about mercenaries or volunteers. We're talking about a ghost army secretly sent by Kim Jong-un on a mission that cost more than 4,700 lives in just a few months. What you're about to find out will completely change how you see the current global alliances. For the first time since the 1950s, North Korean soldiers are fighting on foreign soil. And for the first time in history, North Korea publicly admitted it's sending troops abroad. But why now? Why would Kim Jong-un risk everything by breaking decades of military isolation? The answer is more disturbing than you might imagine. In October 2024, something extraordinary started happening in the shadows of international diplomacy. Satellite images and Western intelligence reports confirmed that North Korea had sent between 10,000 and 14,000 soldiers to support Russian operations in the Kursk region on the border with Ukraine. At first, both Pyongyang and Moscow denied any direct involvement, keeping this military operation completely secret. But why did Kim Jong-un make such a radical decision? The answer lies in a bilateral military deal signed in June 2024 during Putin's historic visit to North Korea, the first in 24 years. This pact was a desperate exchange of resources for military support. Russia, facing huge losses in its campaign in Ukraine and growing difficulties recruiting new soldiers, offered North Korea something Kim Jong-un couldn't refuse: advanced military technology, essential fuel to keep its economy running, and possibly help for its nuclear energy program. In return, Kim Jong-un committed not only to supply ammunition and equipment. According to intelligence reports, more than 20,000 containers of weapons were sent by October 2024, but also what Russia needed most: trained, disciplined soldiers. For the North Korean leader, this seemed like a once-in-a-lifetime chance to modernize his armed forces and gain real combat experience, something his troops had never had before. The North Korean soldiers who arrived in the Kursk region in October 2024 represented some of the best units in the country's armed forces. But nothing in their training prepared them for what they'd face on Ukrainian battlefields. Imagine young people who grew up in a society where the internet is basically non-existent, where the most advanced military tech they knew were gear from the 1980s and 1990s, suddenly confronted by autonomous drones hunting them like invisible predators. These soldiers faced satellite-guided artillery systems with surgical precision, long-range missiles supplied by Ukraine's Western allies, and combat tactics using AI and real-time reconnaissance. The result was devastating. Field reports described terrible scenes: North Korean soldiers trying to hide from drones tracking them with millimeter accuracy, using cover tactics that worked decades ago but were totally useless against modern tech. The situation got even more tragic when it was found many were carrying outdated gear and had no experience with integrated communication systems used by Russian forces. A particularly dramatic episode happened in January 2025 near Kursk City, where military observers visually confirmed over 400 casualties in a single day of fighting. The latest stats revealed by South Korean intelligence in April 2025 paint a grim picture. About 600 North Korean soldiers lost their lives, while total casualties, including wounded, reached an astonishing 4,700. That's about one-third of all troops sent, a casualty rate that would be catastrophic for any modern military force. To put it in perspective, these losses make this operation the third deadliest conflict in North Korea's military history. During its involvement in the Vietnam War era, North Korea sent 1,000 soldiers and suffered only 14 casualties. The brutal difference in numbers shows how modern combat has become exponentially deadlier. But these weren't just stats. They were young people who left their families in North Korea, believing they were serving a glorious cause. Diaries and personal notes found with dead soldiers revealed messages written to their families, expressing confusion about why they were fighting so far away on foreign soil. Other documents showed many truly believed they were on a special military mission or advanced training exercise, only discovering the deadly reality when it was too late. The central irony of this whole tragedy is that Kim Jong-un initially justified sending troops as an opportunity to modernize and strengthen North Korea's armed forces through real combat experience. In theory, surviving soldiers would return with valuable knowledge about modern tactics, familiarity with advanced gear, and practical experience to pass on to the rest of the military. In practice, the outcome was almost the opposite. Returning soldiers brought back not only physical wounds, but also a sober understanding of how outdated and inadequate North Korea's military preparations are for modern conflicts. Many veterans quietly began questioning the effectiveness of their training and the suitability of the equipment they'd been given. More worrying still, some veterans returned with a broader perspective on the outside world, far beyond what the government wants its citizens to know. Even during intense fighting, these soldiers were exposed to technologies, tactics, and even aspects of Western culture through captured gear, prisoner interactions, and simply experiencing life outside North Korea's totally controlled environment. While these events unfolded on the frozen battlefields of Kursk, a parallel and equally devastating crisis was happening inside North Korea itself. For a regime that has always built its legitimacy on protecting its citizens and keeping family unity as a pillar of society, the rising casualties posed an unprecedented challenge. Families of soldiers sent to Russia found themselves in an impossible situation. At first, many didn't even know their sons, husbands, or brothers had been sent to a foreign conflict. The regime kept the operation totally secret, and soldiers were told not to contact their families during the special training period. As weeks turned into months, the absence of news sparked anxiety and distrust. In a society where information is tightly controlled, rumors started quietly spreading. Some families received unexpected visits from military officers who gave vague statements about patriotic service on a special mission, or, in the worst cases, dry notifications about death in service to the homeland. Also, the return of severely wounded soldiers to an already fragile health system is creating challenges the regime struggles to hide. Military hospitals in Pyongyang and other big cities are secretly overwhelmed with injured soldiers needing specialized care. Many returning soldiers suffered wounds from modern weapons that North Korean doctors had never treated before. Explosive drone burns, injuries from GPS-guided artillery fragments, and psychological trauma from high-intensity combat are medical conditions far beyond the country's health system capacity. What happened next surprised even the most seasoned military analysts. Despite the initial devastating losses, the remaining North Korean troops showed an adaptability that impressed and worried Ukrainian forces. Ukrainian soldiers who saw North Koreans in battle described them as disciplined and highly methodical, saying they were more professional than their Russian counterparts. The transformation was radical. They overcame the initial shock, military observers reported. What were once disoriented troops being hunted by drones turned into units that forced Ukrainian forces to change their tactics. Ukrainian commanders admitted having to tell their soldiers to avoid direct battles with North Korean troops, opting instead to plant mines and set traps rather than face direct confrontation. The most impressive adaptation was in understanding the modern reality of drone warfare. North Korean soldiers are now learning drone combat realities firsthand, gaining experience their armed forces never had before. Analysts noted that the next batches won't make the same mistakes. They're learning new tactics and how to fight in a drone environment. But this military evolution came with tactics that shocked even experienced combat veterans. Reports describe extreme behaviors: soldiers detonating grenades under their chins instead of getting captured, using comrades as bait to lure attack drones, removing body armor plates and helmets to move faster on foot, and writing loyalty pledges to Kim Jong-un before missions. The discipline of these troops turned into an unexpected tactical advantage. While Russian soldiers often ditch heavy gear during retreats, North Korean forces showed a stark contrast to reckless orders given to Russian soldiers, keeping organized formations even under heavy fire. More concerning is that this experience is being systematically documented and sent back to Pyongyang. North Korean generals and commanders are likely studying how domestically made weapons perform on the battlefield against Ukrainian forces. Every battle essentially became a testing lab for North Korea's military capabilities. The learning process, however, kept costing blood. Every new tactic developed cost dozens of lives during its implementation and refinement. The difference is that now these losses are generating valuable military knowledge that will be taken back to North Korea, a modern combat university where tuition is paid in human lives. North Korea's involvement in the Ukrainian conflict sent shockwaves far beyond the battlefields. This move represents a fundamental reshaping of global geopolitical alliances and strategic calculations of the world's biggest powers. China, traditionally North Korea's closest ally, found itself in an extremely delicate position. Beijing has to balance its historic support for Pyongyang with the need to keep relatively stable relations with the West and avoid further economic sanctions. North Korea's direct involvement in a conflict that has already strained Sino-Western relations put China in a spot where any move could have major consequences. On the Western side, the presence of North Korean troops completely changed the nature of the Ukrainian conflict. It's no longer just a regional dispute between Russia and Ukraine, but a confrontation directly involving the so-called authoritarian axis formed by Russia, China, North Korea, and implicitly other aligned regimes. Also, recent reports suggest Kim Jong-un is considering sending more troops to replace losses, possibly increasing the total contingent to over 15,000 soldiers. This decision would face significant internal resistance, especially as news of the high death rates quietly spreads among the population. The political sustainability of this military operation is becoming questionable. Even in an authoritarian regime like North Korea, there's a limit to how many human losses the population can silently accept, especially when the promised benefits of the operation aren't materializing as expected. Furthermore, North Korea announced plans to send thousands of military construction workers and demining experts to support rebuilding efforts in Russia's Kursk region. This suggests North Korea's involvement might be shifting from direct combat to logistical and infrastructure support, possibly responding to the heavy casualties its combat troops suffered. This story forces us to face an uncomfortable reality about how decisions made in distant government meeting rooms translate into real, tangible human tragedies. Each of the 4,700 North Korean casualties represents not just a military statistic, but a life cut short, a family broken, and dreams and hopes never fulfilled. For the North Korean soldiers who survived and came home, the experience in Ukraine will likely mark them for life. They carry not only physical scars, but also the knowledge that they were sent into a conflict they didn't fully understand, to serve political goals that may never come true. This situation also raises fundamental questions about the responsibility of political leaders for the lives of the citizens they govern. Kim Jong-un made a decision that cost thousands of young soldiers lives in exchange for uncertain technology and economic benefits. This cold calculation between human lives and strategic gains is one of the darkest faces of modern international politics. As always, I leave you with a question to think about. To what extent should governments have the right to send their citizens into conflicts that don't directly threaten national security? And what is our responsibility as international observers when witnessing decisions that lead to significant human losses? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content about the events shaping our world.